La Resistance. This is not an historical game, despite the name and despite having a theme that has to do with the French resistance in World War II. As the rulebook says, it is a light-hearted, despite the theme, a light-hearted dice game in which you will roll a bunch of dice, and then you will re-roll a bunch of dice, and then you will roll a bunch of more dice, and allegedly you're completing missions as groups of the French resistance. I expected this game to be cooperative given the theme, but it turns out it's competitive. As the rulebook says, some of these groups are a little bit vain. All they care about is their personal glory. And so at the end of the game, you complete missions against the occupants in order to score glory points. The first player to score 12 glory points with their group of resistant fighters wins the game. You have a number of recruits, and if the number of recruits goes down to 0, you're out of the game. Yes, this is a game that has direct player elimination. So it's a unexpected take on this theme. I don't know enough about the French resistance. I know it would have worked very well with the Italian resistance because at the time of the Nazi occupation, Italian partisans were divided into very different ideological groups, and they were fighting in part also to advance their position politically after the war. So that would have worked very well in that scenario. So each player has a board, such as this one, that you use to keep track of how many glory points you have, how many recruits you still have, and also each group has a different special skill. So that's the general idea about that. There's gonna be events because what is a game without event cards? That is the salt of life. Then we have the main heart of the game, really, however, revolves around these mission cards. 3 of them will be face up at the beginning of a player's turn. The general idea is that during your turn you will roll dice, you will try to cover the icons that you see here to complete the missions, and if you cover all of the icons on the left of a mission card, you defeated that card, you remove it there, and you will gain the benefits indicated on the right. However, if there are cards left there at the end of your turn, you will also suffer the penalties indicated here. So, for example, if you do not remove this card by covering these icons here, then you will lose a glory point and you will lose a member of your resistance because the Gendarmerie doesn't like you so much. That means, of course, that if a Tiger tank shows up, it's particularly deadly because you need 3 6s to cover it, or you can replace one of them by removing a member of your group. But if those icons are still visible at the end of your turn, you lose 3 members of the resistance, which is basically half. What you start with, if the Gendarmerie is around, and that was your setup at the beginning of the game, you're almost out of the game if you roll poorly. Because there are things that you can do to mitigate your luck, but not really, as we will see. As for these icons here, as you can see, they're in different colors. If a die icon has a white background, then you must cover it with that number or higher, say 6 or higher if you get modifiers, or 5 or 6s. If it's with a black number, it's with a black background, then you must cover it with a sum of that number or more. So, for example, I would be able to cover that 3 with a 1 and a 2 put together, but I would not be able to cover this 5 with a 2 and a 3 because, again, white background equal that number exactly or greater with a single die. So, this is the general idea. You will roll dice at the beginning of your turn. You get your initial roll. You can mulligan, that is, you can remove one of your dice to roll the remaining ones. There are a couple of things in the rules that they're just a little bit blurry. For example, doesn't say if you have to reroll all of them. If you have to reroll all of them, then the mulligan is very rarely used because, well, if I rolled 2 6s and 2 3s, then I don't want to reroll the 6s, for example. Anyways, you will get your die roll, possibly after a mulligan. Then, for each 6, you have explosive dice, or do you? You have the option for each 6 of rolling an extra die, but you roll those extra dice on these blue dice. Why so? Because you can choose for each 6 to roll an extra blue die, but if you roll a 1 on a blue die only, not the white dice, then you will lose a member of your resistance. So to push your luck, you wanted that extra die, and there's a chance in 6 that that one won't do much, and also you lose a member of your group. So exploding dice are optional in this game. That's an interesting idea. I don't think I've seen other games, and I like it quite a bit. I like that part. So after we get our die rolls, we start covering those icons as best we can, but if I do that, then maybe I need a game effect that lets me cover that one also, and that would be really good for me because I avoid that damage and I score some points. That's the general idea. Cover as many cards as you can, as many icons as you can. Suffer the consequences of the icons that are not covered at the end of your turn. And of course, if I replace these, if I say I defeated these 2 cards, then this will be the tableau that my next player will have to face, which is a lot less intense because they can score 2 points and they don't suffer nearly as dire a threat as I suffered. Worst come to worst, they're going to lose 2 points, 2 members of the resistance. I could have lost 4 if I didn't cover those icons. So, as I said, there are things that you can do. You can exchange dice for different effects instead of placing them there. These other effects, the rulebook says you can trade, spend a total of 6 on summed dice. Say, for example, I can spend a 1, a 2, and a 3 to trigger one of those effects. A summed value of 6, which I assume also means 6. I wish the rulebook say exactly 6 or said 6 and more because again there are times in which I would like to spend a 3 and a 4 for one of those advantages, and I'm not entirely sure from the rulebook that I can if it's 6 and up or exactly 6. It simply says of 6. Using the sum value of 6, you can sow dissension, which is you can spend a total of 6 die to remove 1 recruit from another player's group and steal that recruit. You cannot remove the last one, but if they're down to 2, that's still pretty bad and it's still pretty mean, and you can do that. So you can spend a value of 6 on your dice to steal a recruit from another group. You can steal a glory point. Yes, you can steal a victory point. Remember how I fought long and hard to take down this tank? And it needed 18 or 2 6s and a casualty to do so for a victory point. My opponent next to me rolls that and they steal that victory point to me. I don't like games where you can steal victory points. I don't know if you can tell. If you can tell, I'll tell you now. I don't like games where you can steal victory points. You can also spend a total of 6 to get a Selaguer card, which will give you advantages. However, some are negative, so I actually flipped that one there, booyah, and I stumble onto a German patrol. How lucky. Some of the German patrol. Oh yeah, but no, usually they are good. But there's still the thing, oh well, I'll mitigate my luck by getting one of these cards that give me advantages to just be shot at by a German patrol. In sum, cards will appear before you. Roll the dice. Possibly, if you get any, choose, because you may not get any 6s. If you get 6s, you get a chance of rolling exploding dice, but with the risk of losing a recruit. Assign your dice to cards, trying to cover the icons on the left. Use a value of 6 or more, possibly, to steal recruits from other groups, to steal victory points from other groups, to get hopefully good cards, and that's it. That ends your turn. You continue like this until a player has scored 12 glory points, and at that point the player is the winner of the game. This game didn't really work well for me. Starting from the rulebook, which again gave me the general idea, but then left a couple of questions unanswered. I went and read the example of play, and there were attempts of humor in the example of play, and that always irritates me because that's not why I read examples of play in rulebook, to be entertained by comedy. And also, again, it just still, even the example of they didn't clarify all that much. So if I play the game wrong, then so be it. I'm giving you the experience. I'm sharing the experience of somebody who tried to learn the game as is from the rulebook and tried to play it. And if I got it wrong, well, that's something that may happen. It's still part of my review. It's part of the experience that I'm sharing with you. As I played it, the game felt just incredibly chaotic, incredibly random. Of all the games that I played, somehow the comparison that kept coming to mind wasn't with B-17 Queen of the Sky. I say this because I've been accused of bringing it up too much or seeing too many comparisons between that and any other game that I play. For once, that's not the comparison that came to mind. But with Talisman, I kept thinking of the game Talisman. I kept thinking this feels like Talisman, the card game. Because in that game, you draw a card and there is going to be a major monster that's going to slaughter you and nothing you can do about it. And then the next player receives another card, and it's a treasure. It's something that helps them. They get easier monsters early on, and so they can level up nicely, and then they get the big bosses. Here there is the silver lining that if I get a big 10 and slaughters me, then the tank is left there for you. But then maybe you roll those amazing, awesome dice, you do roll those sixes, and booyah to you is not a problem at all. So you have massive randomness in the kind of missions that you receive, and so that to me, that's a problem. One player will get a very easy turn with easy rewards, another player will get massive challenges, massive aggression from the non-playing enemies, and maybe not that such good rewards. I guess that could have been easily fixed by having, say, a deck with easy missions and a deck with challenging missions. You shuffle them separately, and each turn you draw 2 cards from the easy one and 1 card for the challenge. Then every player will get slightly different combinations of challenges and easier missions, but it will still more or less balance. But there's absolutely no balancing mechanism in I get slaughtered my turn and you get easy stuff to deal with. Another thing is that there really aren't any balancing mechanisms for the luck of the dice. I know it's a dice game, there's going to be luck, and yet, if a game is going to be massively luck-based, then I want it to be zombie dice, or like zombie dice. I like zombie dice. I played in 5 minutes, totally random, it's totally luck-based, but it's 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm setting up all these boards and preparing, getting all excited with shuffling different decks, and then I get kicked out of the game basically in turn 1. Or virtually for all intents and purposes. There is no real balancing mechanism for the luck of the dice. And when it's the case, I want the game to be super simple. If it's a game that has sort of like the kind of perspective I'm thinking about Elder Sign, then I want some relevant decisions. I want some balancing mechanisms. I want something that I can do with my 6s and something I can do with my 1s. And you can say, well, you can trade 6 1s for one of those effects that you can trade for a 6. But I can also use a 6 for that. So all those effects that give you other ways, other actions, so you can trade a value of 6 for something else, they're still predicated on you getting good dice. The player that rolls a lot of 6s will get to cover a lot of icons and to steal my victory points and to get other cards that may or may not give them extra effects. So it's as simple as that. Rolling high is always good, is always preferable, and rolling low always sucks. And there aren't a lot of things that you can do, because if I rolled only once, I don't even get the option of getting those explosive dice. Again, there's a certain 1980s feel to it, to this game, which again accounts for the comparison with Talisman. I'm thinking of other games like Kingsport, where you can roll low, then you activate different effects rather than if you roll high, you activate different effects. A game where rolling high is always better, and there really isn't anything that you can do against that, and so rolling high is always better and rolling low is always worse. It's just too old school. There's just too much luck there. And ultimately, if that is the general idea, then I prefer a game which is, one turn, I roll a 6, I kill Hitler, and I win. And, you can have a Resistance movie or story about that. There's a movie about that. And it's just one turn, and if I roll a 1, I lose. If ultimately it comes down to that, or almost that, it feels like this is a lot of rules and unique effects and abilities, but it just comes down to who rolls the highest. Then I don't necessarily want to play that game, which feels like it drags too much or ends abruptly, but ultimately it is whoever can roll more. For example, how about easy fix some of those other actions so you can steal points? I don't like stealing points, but it has to be used as a balancing mechanism. How about you can only use a 2? So you can trade a result of 1 for that effect. You can trade a result of 2 for another effect. How about we give those optional actions to low rolls as opposed to high results, which are good anyways. So ultimately, this is why I didn't much care really for this game. I played it with my daughters and that didn't work. They hated it. Then I started playing Solitaire because I want to get a sense of the game. I thought maybe I'm not getting it. And again, I play Solitaire controlling various non-playing parties, and one party will get kicked out in turn 2, another party will just breeze through the entire experience and score a ton of points. You roll low, you're stuck. You roll high, you get a chance of rolling even higher and using all those effects. And you get bad missions, you're gonna have it bad. You get good missions, you're gonna have it good. So between the luck of the draw for the mission cards and the roll of the dice, it feels like a completely random, completely chaotic game. And that's it. I did not enjoy it very much because I thought for a game that has a certain story or tries to have a certain story, a certain architecture to keep you entertained for 40 minutes, half an hour. Playing time is 44 minutes, not 45, 44. It's funny when they get that detail. But for a game that is not a 1 minute filler, then there's just too much randomness, too much chaos to keep me interested. And this is my assessment of La Resistance. It's too long for a completely chaotic, completely luck-based game, and it felt that way to me. It felt like agency didn't really account for much in this game.